In today's brief video, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the dark side of sobriety and addiction recovery. I struggled deeply for years with addiction to nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content, substances that my channel and my programs now focus on helping people quit. To learn more about that, you can check out the pinned comment or the video description for our paid and free resources. And I spent a lot of time over the last several years making videos talking about all the benefits of addiction recovery and quitting these things. Better physical health, better mental health, improved finances, improved relationships, all this great stuff. But the reality is sobriety is not all peaches and roses. And I don't think that the dark side of sobriety gets enough attention, even on channels like my own. And I feel that this is going to be a really important topic to cover because if you're new to getting sober and quitting substances, there's a good chance that you really might be struggling. And if you're watching videos like mine and videos like other people's where they're talking about all of these miraculous benefits that occur, and you're not experiencing those benefits, there's a good chance that you're going to wind up going back to the substance because then you're like, well, the benefits of sobriety, the benefits of quitting drugs, they just don't apply to me because I'm not having the same great experience that Dr. Frank had or that someone else had on a channel. So hopefully by shedding some light on this, we can ease some of that for people who are struggling to quit smoking weed, quit drinking alcohol, quit popping pills, whatever it may be. The first dark side to sobriety is the withdrawal process. Withdrawals don't happen for everyone, but they happen to a majority of people quitting, whether that's quitting alcohol, quitting weed, quitting pills, even quitting nicotine products like vapes or cigarettes. And withdrawals suck. There's no way around it. Struggling with cravings, insomnia, emotional dysregulations, mood swings, sweating, headaches, body aches and pains. All of this it blatantly sucks. It's not a pleasurable experience. And many times we set off quitting drugs with the expectation of feeling better physically, only to realize that initially we actually wind up feeling worse than we did while we were addicted. And I want to emphasize the word initially because withdrawals do come to an end. I spend a lot of time on my channel saying that withdrawals are the death of addiction. Withdrawal is not a signal that you're suffering. It's a symptom of addiction's death. It's a signal that addiction is dying and that your body is detoxing, healing, and finally beating this thing. But nothing changes the fact that withdrawals suck. They're not pleasurable to go through, and they can bring you into a pretty dark place. And for some people, if you're coming off alcohol or benzos or things like that, that the place that they bring you to might be a medical detox, a supervised medicated detox, so you can quit safely without dying. And that's a hard process. That's one of the dark sides of sobriety. Secondly, I think is the emotions that come up when we first quit substances. People typically consume weed or any drug, alcohol, for two primary reasons. Reason number one has to do with coping, right? We're using the drug to cope with a certain set of emotions, right? I know I've talked about on my channel, my parents went through a pretty rough divorce. I had a great childhood, but there were certainly rough aspects of it. And I use substances to cope with parts of that, right? And this could also have to do with things beyond family matters, right? Other relationships, friendships, struggles that I faced throughout school and my professional career. I used drugs to cope with certain emotions, anxiety, depression, things like that. Or people use drugs recreationally. It's typically those two reasons. When it comes to the emotional aspect of things, when you quit the substance, most people find that those emotions didn't go away. They were just kind of covered up for a period of time, whether that be a few years or a few decades. But those emotions are still there. And in many cases, those emotions were never properly addressed or processed. And when we quit substances, here we are going through withdrawals. And now we're left to face all of these really dark and scary and potentially really overwhelming emotions. It could be grief, anxiety, depression, trauma-related stuff, whatever. And that's really hard. That sucks. That's a dark side of sobriety. When we talk about getting sober, leading to improved mental health. I think it's hard initially when you're going through withdrawals and then you have all of this emotional dysregulation that you're dealing with to feel like your mental health is ever going to improve. Initially, it actually feels like it's worse, kind of like your physical health feels worse. And this is one of the dark sides of sobriety that people don't talk about. All of that stuff that we were covering up or that we were managing through substance use is still there, and and we come to the realization that it's been largely unmanaged. And managing it and learning how to navigate those emotions is really challenging, and it's not always a pleasurable experience. It can be quite dark. Thing number 3 that I think is a dark side of sobriety is isolation and loneliness. I know for me, a lot of my social circles, they consumed substances recreationally and socially, right? Going out to the bars with your friends, having drinks at dinner, well, even on a professional level, right? Like making business deals over the golf course and having beers, or going out to dinner and having cocktails. And when you first quit, or it could be smoking weed with your friends or whatever at a barbecue, it doesn't matter, just hanging out at someone's house. Now you've quit. And initially, again, emphasis on initially, we're usually finding that we have to create some space between those people and those environments and those circumstances. And this can be very isolating, especially if your social circles and your networking was rooted in people who consume substances, which is often the case if you're struggling with addiction. So socially, in the beginning, it can be very isolating because chances are you weren't spending a lot of time around people who were sober, who weren't consuming drugs. And let's be honest, a lot of people smoke weed, a lot of people drink alcohol, a lot of people have substance use problems in one way, shape, or form. It might not look as bad as other people's, but drugs and substance use is a big part of our culture. And when you step out of that, I think you realize for the first time just how isolating and kind of, in this case, how unique you're becoming, because it's like, oh my God, I'm not doing that anymore. What am I going to do now? Who am I going to hang out with? What am I going to do on the weekends? How am I ever going to be able to see or chill with that group of friends again? Or even worse, it might, in your case, involve a significant other, a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, your children. Like, right? When we quit a substance, it's very disruptive to many of the relationships that we currently have, and that can often result in a lot of isolation and loneliness. Now, I do say this with a grain of salt because in some instances for people with addiction, it was actually addiction that led to the isolation and the loneliness, and quitting can actually very quickly reverse that. In other cases, more like I'm talking about in today's video, we find ourselves removed. I know when I quit drinking alcohol, this was certainly the case. A lot of things that my friends would do, a lot of social events, I lost interest in them because I was no longer drinking, and that's dark. There's nothing fun or gratifying about isolation and loneliness and having to cut yourself off from certain social circles, especially if you don't have a significant other or someone else that you can kind of lean on during this time, or a community that you can lean on. Lastly, and I think this is maybe one of the most confusing aspects to the dark sides of sobriety, is the identity crisis that people often face. Substance use, believe it or not, it becomes part of a person's daily routine. Even though that routine may seem insane or chaotic to the outside world, when you're struggling with substance use, that's what you know, right? Like you wake up and you smoke weed, you come home from work and you drink alcohol and watch pornography or whatever. That's a routine. And that routine you identify with it. You're comfortable with it. And when you stop smoking or you stop drinking and you are out around people and people are like, oh, you don't want to have a drink, or, oh, you're not going to smoke with me, your routine's all thrown off. Or even just coming home at night after a long day of work, you put the kids to bed and it's like, now what? Now what am I going to do? And it's kind of having to rework your whole identity. Like a large part of your life has just changed. And although it's a fresh start, although it's an opportunity for a really, really positive change, change is very, very hard. It's never easy, right? We could talk about someone trying to lose weight and they're going to the gym and they're dieting and they're not eating the desserts anymore or whatever. Like, this is hard. Your identity and your behaviors and how you interact with other people is changing. And even though it's for the better, that doesn't necessarily mean that can't feel dark and lonely and isolated. And this identity crisis, who am I if I don't smoke weed anymore? Who am I if I'm not the person who's, not drinking alcohol at the party? How am I going to behave? Am I going to have fun? Am I going to be bored? Should I even bother being there? Do I even fit in anymore to anything that I've done for the last, in my case, nine years of my life? This is an identity crisis. And I don't know how else to explain it. Do I fit in with my significant other? They drink. I'm sober now. Now what? Right? These are real things that people face. And I don't know how else to say it, except it's very, very confusing. And when people get confused, it can become very emotional. It can create anxiety. It can create depression. It's confusing. I don't know how else to word that identity crisis. And these are aspects of sobriety that I don't think people talk about enough, but that I think deserve a lot of attention. Because if you've been struggling and you're watching videos like mine where we're talking about all the benefits and all the amazing things that can happen with getting sober, or other people's videos, and you're not yet experiencing those, or you don't even see those benefits as being attainable, quitting becomes a very disheartening process. And quitting and giving up on sobriety and recovery becomes a reality for a lot of people because of this. But I think if we talk about it, and we talk about the struggles, and we talk about it's not all peaches and roses, I actually think it sets forth proper expectations for getting sober and allows a lot more people opportunity to actually make real progress in their recovery process. Something that I'll leave you with is, you can't have light without dark. You can't have sun without rain, and you can't have pleasure without pain. If it wasn't for the dark part of sobriety, the loneliness that you might experience, the withdrawals, the identity crisis, the social, the re-networking of relationships, I don't think there would be an appreciation for how good you can actually feel, right? Like, if you've ever had a cold or had food poisoning, or you've ever had the flu, you feel so sick, and then you feel better, and it's like, oh my God, I'm so grateful I feel better. I'm so grateful my nose isn't stuffed, or I'm not throwing up and I can eat food again. It really creates a lot of gratitude, that dark side of things. And I think it makes the success that people have in sobriety all the more sweet and all the more worthwhile. And I actually see this when I do my coaching. People who don't struggle, in some instances, may be more prone to relapse, because they're like, yeah, I quit. I don't really feel any different. I didn't really struggle. I'm doing better now, but I didn't really do bad. So I don't really have a benchmark as to what better actually should feel like. And then sometimes they relapse. So if you are really struggling and this is a difficult process for you, don't worry. Don't stress over that. I think it's going to make your eventual success all the more satisfying and all the more gratifying. Okay. If you need help and this is a journey that you're going on, and you need guidance or you need some coaching, I'd be happy to do that. We have our Addiction Mindset School community. We have one-on-one coaching programs and a whole bunch of other free resources to help you along the way. So be sure to check out the pinned comment in the video description. And if you don't care to do any of that, just follow me right into the next video. Until next time.